Thank you for hanging out with me today, where I'll be talking about the one book that drove me insane for. Hold on. How long did I read this for? Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Yeah, Monday. For 4 fucking days of my life. I gave it so much time. So much of my time to this book, and it was not even, it was not even on my radar. The only reason I read it is because I had a romance class. Everything, everything went away. And before I start, I would like to apologize. I would like to formally apologize to the Spanish love deception. When I reviewed that in Valentine's Day, I was harsh, and I think I had good reasons to be harsh. However, if I knew that during the same year I would be reading this book, in retrospect, The Spanish Love Deception is so much better. Now, I may have given this book a higher rating. Guilty Love, I gave it a bit of a higher rating, and I'll explain why it got a higher rating later. But in retrospect, The Spanish Love Deception is a saint. So, my apologies to The Spanish Love Deception. I am so sorry for speaking so badly of you. After reading this book in retrospect, The Spanish Love Deception is so much better. And at least I didn't feel like I was going to. No, at least I didn't feel like I wanted to push my head through a fucking wall with every line I read. That's what I have to say. I mean, with these words, do you need a review? I'm still gonna, but like, my apologies to the Spanish Love Deception, because although I found problems, and although I said everything I said, let it be known that The Spanish Love Deception is still better than Guilty Love by Charlotte Lamb. Way better. So much. I was such a sweet summer child in January of 2022. Now we are in September 2022, and this book broke me. It broke me. It broke me. You have no idea. It broke me. Forever. This book has broken me. So, let's talk about the synopsis to the book that broke me. I hate this book so much. I hate it. I despise it. Nowhere to run. Lindsay York loved her husband, but Barty had changed. His rage and growing despair since the accident had taken a brutal toll. Lindsay was trapped in a nightmare, and Richie Calhoun, I think is how you pronounce his name, knew it. Lindsay and Richie's relationship had always remained on a cool professional level, but now faces. Wait, no. What? Wait. But now facets or. Yeah, I think this. It says. I think. No. Facades. I would have to let this read it to me. Were beginning to crumble. Needs and desires they were powerless to deny tormented them, and it was Lindsay who was paying the highest price. Then a horrible tragedy shattered their lives, and Richie's courage proved his love in a way that few men ever could. Okay, in all seriousness, as much as this book broke me, I want to give out some content warnings that I did not receive and I think are necessary. I wanted, before I give those, one of the things that I was told in my class when reading this by my professor is that, we can't judge. This is what romance was like before, and we can't necessarily judge it with our sensibilities in the 21st century. But god damn it, I don't care. I am judging this book for what it is. And I'm specifically judging this book for what it is because I want to warn people who may not be interested in reading this kind of book. Again, disclaimer that I make for all of my videos when I talk about problematic books, any problematic books, or any problematic parts of a book. When I tell you it is problematic, I am not trying to push you away from reading the book. I'm not trying to say don't read the book. What I'm trying to do is warn others that may not be into this kind of stuff. If you are into these books, if you like reading these books, then read it. Nothing I'm going to say should change your mind. Read it at your heart's content, have your own opinions, have your own thoughts. I don't care. I do not judge you. I'm not judging you. I'm judging this book. I'm not judging you. I'm just judging the book, and I'm judging it for what it is, in my opinion, as a reader. If this is what you like, you read it, have fun. When I talk about problems, I do want to talk about them to acknowledge that these problems are a thing, but also to let other readers that are just not interested in reading kind of problematic stuff like this, to let them know that it is problematic as hell. And this book is very problematic. Very. And I will be talking about it. Not in spoilers, I don't think. But in, at least not yet. I'll tell you if I'm going to go into spoilers. But yeah, that's the reason I want to do this. Now for some content warnings, which I think we should have gotten because I think it is important. And one of the things that my professor had mentioned was like, when you read this, you're looking for like content warnings, stuff like that. And it's like, if you didn't have that before, this is how it used to be. I don't care if we didn't have these. I don't care if we didn't have these things. I really don't care if we didn't have content warnings back in 1994. That doesn't change the things of today. If you're reading these books, you should still get a content warning. So I am here to provide you with the content warnings I have gathered from this book, because honestly no one gave me a content warning and it was really triggering. I did not go through any of the things that are in this book, but it was really 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 triggering to read. So when reading in Braille, I kind of just get to read everything, especially when you're reading physically. You just get to get everything. And you're reading an audio, it might be a little bit easier to get past through. At least for me, it's usually easier to read through problematic crap in audio, but I couldn't find this book in audio, so I was stuck reading it physically. And I think it's very important to give people content warnings no matter when the book was published. So this book was published in 1994, and although that was not a thing then, it is a thing now, and it is a thing we know about, and it's still something we should do. So my content warnings. We have an abusive relationship. We have abusive relationship. We have sexual assault. Definitely, in my opinion, there's definitely sexual assault, and I will. It's a lot. We have sexual assault. We have dubious consent, and then there is stalking. So if you're not interested, if you don't want to read any of those things, these are the content warnings that I've got. If there are any other content warnings, I may not have caught them. I suggest that you do not just take my content warnings for it. I suggest that you look up your own a content warning list on Google as well, besides taking mine. With that in mind, I don't want to really talk about those things very much in this video. If I do, I will I may briefly talk about them in this video, to talk about the way that the things are set up in the book. So I will be briefly talking about those things in this video. I understand if you may not wants to watch the rest of the review. But for anyone who just doesn't want to watch it, just to give you an idea of my thoughts on this book, it sucks. I recommend it to no one. You as a romance reader deserve better. deserve better. But if this is something you're interested in reading, up to you. Like I said. But I understand if this is a video you may not want to watch, because although I will not be talking about it in depth, I will be mentioning it at least once in the video, because I want to kind of talk about the book and how it revolves around the characters. I understand if this video you don't want to watch. Take care of yourselves. Please be aware of where you are and if you're able to watch this or not. So that's why I'm providing the content warnings. I don't want to I really, with this review, I don't want to accidentally trigger anybody, and I don't want to have like anybody accidentally get hurt because they didn't get the content warnings. I will have the content warnings in the description, even though I gave the warnings here in the video verbally. I will also have it in the description for anyone who needs it. So please, please, please take care of yourselves, and if you're going to watch this video, please be in a good mental space. Although I'll be mentioning it briefly, I still think that could be triggering, and I'm not too sure how people react to this stuff. So yeah, take care of yourselves, okay? So, on to the review. This book was 192 pages, and for the length of it, I'll say this. The only good thing about it was like the prose and the twist at the end. Those are the only positives. The twist at the end and the prose. That's it. No, that's it. That's all I can say about like positives. Everything else is negative as hell. All the relationships, all these characters in this book, they don't have personality. Where are the characters in this book? Because they do not exist. Lindsay is basically a doormat, and Richie is the epitome of toxic masculinity. The epitome. The men in this book suck. They're both bad. No, they're both bad. The heroine may not be great, and I'm not gonna judge her on some of her decisions based on the whole abusive relationship stuff. I'm actually just judging her on other ends in my thought. But I also know that it was 1994, and that misogyny was a thing, a really big thing. Here we at least talk about it. They were not having conversations about that before, but now we are. This book is filled with so much misogyny. That might even be its own content warning. This book is filled with so much misogyny and gender role bullshit that I wanted, again, see my wall? I just wanted to push my head through it. That's it. That's all I wanted. I just wanted all I wanted was to just push my head through the wall. There's a lot of it in this book. The characters are non-existent. They don't exist. They were established. They were not developed. Another thing that we have here in this book, there is a lot of infantilization. You have the male characters constantly infantilizing Lindsay. The story is not about Lindsay. The description kind of lies to you and tells you that the story is about Lindsay. No, it's not. It's not about Lindsay. It's about the men in her life. It's about the men in her life who pretty much run everything she does. Everything that she does in this book is really run by Barty or Richie. Every single thing. There is no there's no like there is no there's like no way she has no there is no agency for her. She has no agency. She has zero personality. If anything, she doesn't have that much. She offers little to as a character to a reader. um I felt kind of bad, I think, in the beginning, because she was going through this abusive relationship and all this stuff. But at the same time, out of that relationship, out of the relationship with the men, though, if we're gonna go that way, she's also feels like she just has no adult skills. Like, she is infantilized by the men, but she herself is kind of like a child in my thought. No, I'm not joking. Like, she feels like a child. She feels like she feels like she's a child. Even without the infantilization from the male characters, she still feels like a child. Like, there are scenes where people are talking about stuff and she just acts like a child. She's like, puts her hands over her ears and everything. Like, in she it's like she has no adult skills and she doesn't know how to handle her problems. It's like the male characters have to tell her how to handle her problems. So the author, all not just the male characters, but the author also infantilizes her. It's really annoying. Um, all the relationships are toxic, like I said, and it's not just the male characters with Lindsay. The female character of Megan in the book is also, I think, kind of toxic as well. Like, in a way, like, there is no support between women, with the exception maybe of Ella, the Aunt Ella, and them. There is no support between the women. Like, women seemingly have no support. There's nothing. Everything has to do with the men around them. And there's a point where she's like, there's a point that I'm gonna talk about in a minute, but basically, yeah, that's a thing. And then, but this book also felt, I just want to say, like watching a soap opera, but not a fun one. At least when you watch a good soap opera like Dynasty, which I started very recently as of recording. I started watching Dynasty yesterday, and at least with Dynasty, the drama is fun. The drama is just fun. With things like Ruby or La Fuerza del Destino, well, except for one part, actually two parts, and like Teresa or whatever, the drama is fun. It's cool. But in this, it felt like the author was like pushing stuff to happen to make things more dramatic. That is what this felt like. And it also felt like the abusive relationship was there to make Richie look like the better person, to look like the hero. And what this is why, by the way, I'm going into spoilers now if you're still watching. I'm going to spoilers right now. So, in the book, there's a murder. Barty dies. By like chapter 4, he's dead. He's dead. And Richie gets convicted, long story short. And he's like, oh, I did it for, he tells her, like, I did it for you, blah, blah, blah. Listen, I'm just gonna say that way. He says, like, I did it for you. And he also is like, when he's going to jail, he's like, listen, I don't need you to make things harder on me. I need you to be there for me, please, Lindsay. And I'm like, when I read this, I'm just like, she doesn't owe anything to you. You went to the house, and she doesn't. You could have saved her life. You could have done this. You could have done that. But she still doesn't owe you anything. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, that's what I was thinking. And then he leaves. And then there's a point, by the way. I want to mention that there's no romance. Like, you don't see on the page where she's like, I feel anything for him. It's just it's like the romance in this book is she felt something. Like I'll explain more about it in a minute, but the romance doesn't exist. But I want to tell you a little bit about this part first. So there's a murder, right? Richie goes to prison. He's convicted. And she ends up, leaving her old house and all that stuff. And she is blaming herself for everything that happened, for Richie's imprisonment, for pretty much everything, right? And there is a point where I kind of lost my train of thought, but there are points in this book, in the last of the book is kind of where the drama kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Every chapter, the drama just gets bigger. But with this point specifically, one of the reasons I say even Megan as a character is not oh, actually I remember the point I'm gonna go with, but first I want to mention this. The reason I mention that Megan isn't a supportive friend or a supportive female character is because Lindsay asks her not to mention to anybody, where she is, because she saw her in one place. She's like, don't mention to anybody where she is, because surprise, surprise, when Richie gets out of jail, he hires a private detective to look for Lindsay. He is extremely obsessed with her. And here's the interesting part. I want to say the interesting part, actually. The interesting part is that the author seems to have some awareness that this is obsession, because there's a point where Megan talks to her and she's like, Ted says he is very obsessed with you, or something like that. She seems to have some moments of awareness, but it's still portrayed as good. And now part of the reason is that if you didn't portray it this way, you wouldn't get published. And in a way, I understand. Slightly. I don't forgive it. I don't condone it. I understand. So what ends up happening with Megan is that she, when Lindsay asked not to tell her where she is, because of course Richie's looking for her with a private detective, you find out later that she told her husband Ted, and she's like, I'm sorry, but I can't keep secrets from Ted. Dude, you know that he's obsessed with her and that Ted potentially could. Supposedly, she made Ted promise not to tell anybody. But you know that Ted and Richie are good friends. And you know that she could potentially tell Ted. You also know that your friend might be in danger. And you fucking say something? Really? I don't understand what happened here. I was upset. So upset here. So the reason I also say that the abusive relationship was put in that role of just to make it look better. So the abusive relationship had very little to do. It had a lot to do with the story, but it was mainly put as a way to make the men like one better than the other, almost like lesser evil crap. So let's talk about this part though. He eventually finds her. Where she is, even though she was hiding pretty much in the middle of nowhere. There were no neighbors or anything, so even though she was hiding in the middle of nowhere, he still found her by trailing her cousin. Right? Or her cousin. So he still found her. And in the beginning of this, he basically he definitely, I consider this assault. He definitely sexually assaulted her. Although even though there was no penetration or anything, he definitely sexually assaulted her. And in the dialogue that they have, she is very much afraid of him. Very much afraid of him. And he literally talks like a rapist. Like, the kind of dialogue that he says is things like, I want you and I'll have you, make no mistake of it. Things like that. Things a criminal would say. These are things a criminal would say to their victim. This is what a rapist would say to their victim. This is what a stalker would say to their victim. Although a stalker will also say, You gave me this signal. You're in love with me. Which is something that he kind of says, but not with the signal. Alexa, stop. Not with a signal. He says, you know what's going on between us. Like, you know, you have feelings. Which is why it doesn't feel like a romance, because she quote unquote has feelings for him because he says she has feelings for him. It doesn't work, okay? It does not work. Let us be honest about it. It does not work. So, yeah, he basically sexually assaults her, even though there was no penetration. Like, he gets to taking her bikini top, he kisses her forcefully, and she doesn't want it. Then, when she finally gets him to leave and walk and stuff like that, she leaves her window open in her room because I guess she wanted some air and she went to take a shower. He breaks into her house. He finds a ladder and breaks into her house through a window. She even threatens to call the police on him for breaking and entering at some point. And the sex scene that they have, she agrees. Again, the dubious consent, because before she was like, no, I don't want to. And then now she's like, yeah, I want to do it. Like, it feels forced and dubious to me. So they have that. Then he kind of just goes like that he has to leave for business in 10 minutes. And his expression was like he didn't enjoy it and he hurts her or whatever and things like that. We find out later, I'm going to fast forward to the fact that she tried to leave and he took these plugs away from her car so she couldn't turn it on. She literally couldn't leave because he made it impossible for her to turn on her car. But when she's going to walk to where she wanted to go to get help and get extra plugs and put them in or whatever, there is a horse riding accident where he almost crashes into her with a horse. And she's having like a panic attack. She's screaming. He slaps her to get her out of it. Whatever. And then we find out the twist. The twist of the book, which is the only reason it got a higher rating than the Spanish Love Deception. It's the only reason. The twist is the only reason this book had a higher rating than the Spanish Love Deception. And we find out that it wasn't Richie who killed Barty. It was her who killed Barty with a candlestick, and she hit him as hard as she could in self-defense. But he came in and he took the candlestick from her or whatever, so that's why his fingerprints were there. And he thought in the beginning that she was having some sort of amnesia, but that she would eventually remember and, tell the truth. Because it would be a genuine self-defense case. And she's like, why didn't you say something? Because, yeah, you idiots, why didn't you say something? And she, she's very sorry about that. She was guilty, blah, blah, blah. And then he's like, why did you do it or whatever? And he's like, I did it for you. Basically, like, I went to jail for you. I am here sitting reading this and I'm like, you went to jail for her, supposedly. Then you get out of jail and you stalk her, you obsessive rapist idiot. You stalk her. And then you just say, I did it for you because I'm in love with you. What the fuck? I'm so upset. I'm so upset. Can you see why this book broke me? Can you see it? If you're watching. It's like, I did it for you. And then the whole point where they made love or whatever, and she's like, but I thought you didn't enjoy it or whatever, like you didn't, you didn't say anything, you just left. He's like, that's because I had to leave for business, and if I didn't, I would have just gone to do it again. I mean, and he's like, I thought you didn't enjoy it or whatever. How could you think that, Lindsay? What else was she supposed to think? What else? You left without saying anything. You just said I had to leave and when. And he's like, didn't even say he'll be back or anything. It's like, it literally read like he had sex with her for revenge. That's literally what it read like. Like he had sex with her for revenge. Oh my god. Oh my goodness. And he's like, "How could you think that, Lindsay?" I'm sorry. What was she supposed to think again? Was she supposed to think that you enjoyed it when you just like, I don't know, walked away? I want to know what she was supposed to think. I really want to know. And then it kind of just ends with them together happily ever after, because we all want toxic relationships in our lives. There are even more infantilization problems in this book. There are points where whatever she says, the guy, Richie, kind of just says, "No, I'm right because of this." Everything she says is kind of wrong. And it's like, "No, for this reason." There's the one where she's like, there's one where she's like wearing a blazer and a shirt. And he's like, "Aren't you hot in that?" And he's like, "No, I'm fine." She's like, "No way." And he literally takes her blazer. And it's like, "Isn't that better?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's better." And it's like, what? He even makes inappropriate comments at times because because she's married in the book, and he even makes inappropriate comments like when she asked if she could borrow his shirt because she didn't have any other clean clothes so she can sleep, and he's like, "You have any idea how sexy you look with my shirt on?" And I'm like, "Yo, she's married." There's also a point in the beginning. It was very creepy and very weird, where he kind of realized when they were talking about his mom or whatever that she has like the same build and she kind of looks like her in a way. And then he's like, he's like, "This may have been why I hired her, like impulsively. Like, I mean, I did think she was too young and too attractive." What? There's also one point where he's like, "I was looking for a middle-aged person, and especially when they were married, because for some reason people kept falling in love with me." That just sounds like a bragging to me. That sounds like a dude that's bragging. And he's just like, "Because these secretaries kept falling in love with me with no encouragement from me." So I wanted to hire someone. I shortlisted more like the married applicants, and like and I wanted to hire a middle-aged woman who was already kind of like set up or whatever. Um, but I mean, he's like, "But then again, I hired her. At least now I can mold her into the secretary I want." And I'm here like, this is kind of I'm going extreme, but it kind of sounds like grooming. So yeah, those are my thoughts on this relationship. It sucks. This is not romantic because it just feels like, because there is nowhere on the page where Lindsay is like, "I feel something for this person," and there's nothing on the page where Richie is like, "I love this person." Lindsay literally has feelings when he says she has feelings. That is how much of the story is. There are no characters, there is no agency. Characters are pawns that are moved around to fit the plot. That is what this is. That is all this is. There is so much wrong with this book. Again, the abusive relationship was mainly there. You make a guy abusive to make the other guy seem better. That is what this author did. And the abusive relationship wasn't given any. The abusive relationship was a pretty big theme, and it was not given the the respect it needed to have. And I think that this is definitely a very disrespectful portrayal of abuse because people go through it. It's also very disrespectful to portray stalking as a good thing when people go through it. Now, I also think that we need to separate fiction from reality. However, some people seeming not cannot for some reason can't always do it. There are people that genuinely just feel like fiction is, I feel like, if, like my professor said, if you are writing something, write it. Write whatever you want to write, but be aware of the message you are sending out. Whatever you're writing as an author, you need to be aware of what message you're sending out to your readers. You don't necessarily need to portray things correctly. You don't necessarily need to do this stuff, but you at least need to be aware that what you're portraying isn't good if it's bad, and be aware of the messaging you're sending. you really should be aware of what you're writing if you're doing it. And this author was writing in a time where if she didn't write things like this, they probably wouldn't have gotten published. And though I feel for her, I also think that if this book is a book you plan to read and you don't realize what's in it, and then you just go in kind of blindly, like I did because I had to do it for class, it could be really hurtful and very triggering. I was triggered by a couple of things that were in this book, but I was also triggered by the gender roles part of this book. I am very much opposed to gender roles. I do not subscribe to gender roles. I, in my personal life, I have seen how harmful gender roles can be for people. I have seen the extreme harm it can do. And it was really triggering to me to see that in this book. So, yes, although we cannot always judge this with our 21st century, sensibilities, we should still give out content warnings for old books as well as new ones, because there are some readers today that might be reading it. And even though it was published in a time where this stuff wasn't necessarily talked about, or wasn't necessary, or it just didn't exist as a conversation, because these things existed, but just because it didn't exist as a conversation, it does not mean that we should not offer the content warnings that are appropriate for this book, which is why I offered them in the beginning of the somewhere in the beginning of the video. So that's all I have to say about it. My mental health went through the roof when I was reading it. I was screaming so much. I screamed at FaceTime with my friend. Like, it was a lot. So please, yeah. I don't know what to say. Feels weird to just ask you, tell me what you think about this book in the comment section if you read it. I didn't love the heroine and I didn't like the hero. They both suck. So if you have any thoughts on this book, whether you plan to read it or if you read it, let me know your thoughts. If you stuck around for it, thanks for watching and hanging out with me. Consider subscribing to my channel and turning on notifications. Also, you can consider checking out my blog. It's also in the description. This feels really weird after talking about such a harsh topic. I'm sorry. It's in the description. You can also see my other series as well in the description that I have in the channel. So you can check that. I'll see you next week for another review. And it'll be a lighter review, I promise. It'll be a very light review. I'll be reviewing next Sunday A Colton Encounter by Addison Fox. And while I was reviewing, I actually found out that there was a second book in the Colton series that I didn't know. So I actually want to see it. I actually want to read it. Maybe I'll find it in a bookstore and I'll read it. I'm currently reading another fiction braille book, so yeah. So it'll be a light review next week, but until my next video, which should be on a Wednesday, consume stories and take care of yourselves, okay? Bye, guys.